Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, the Chancellor with the Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome to our podcast series, What's New in ArchLou? This show highlights the people and ministries of the Archdiocese, the Catholic Church in Central Kentucky. Join us each month as we welcome guests to discuss our local church and invite you to get involved as you deepen your own engagement with your Catholic faith. This program is brought to you by the ArchLou Podcast Network. Well, everybody, we made it to February. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for spring. But it's a little more wait till it comes, but we'll get there. Hope everybody's well. Today we have two great guests. Deacon Stephen Bowling is the director of Family and Life Ministries for the Archdiocese, and Mistianna Barnes is on that staff. She serves as one of our marriage event coordinators, alongside her husband, who's Deacon Derek Barnes. So let me tell you a little bit about them, and then they get to talk to you. But before I do anything else, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
We're glad to be here.
Deacon Stephen was ordained a deacon in 2008 and is assigned to St. Gabriel Parish. He became the director of the office in 2015. He is from New Haven, Kentucky. He's graduated from Bethlehem High School in Bardstown, and he has a bachelor's degree from Bellarmine University and a master's degree from St. Meinrad Seminary. Deacon Stephen and his wife Susan have 3 adult children, all who live in the Louisville area. Mistianna is from Murray, Kentucky, and has a BA and an MA from Western Kentucky University, where she was a leader in student government and a member of the Kappa Delta sorority. No sorority stories today. We'll hear about those probably now. At Western Kentucky, Mistianna met her husband of now 29 years. Mistianna and Derek are members of St. Margaret Mary Parish, where Derek serves as a deacon, and their daughter Kaylee is a member there as well, where she went to grade school. In addition to what I've already shared, let's learn more about you. So I'm going to start with Mistianna, because you're right here. So tell me a little more about you besides the bio I just did.
Okay, well, I am a cradle Catholic.
Cradle Catholic, okay.
I grew up in Murray, Kentucky, obviously, and it's a college town, but it's also a small town. Yeah. So we only had one Catholic church, and it was St. Leo's, and that's where my family went to worship every Sunday. And if you know anything about small communities, everybody kind of has their special seat in
church?
In the church, right? And so our seat was the second row on the right,
okay.
And I think my parents chose that just to make sure we behaved in church. Right. But Derek and I also got married at St. Leo's.
Okay.
And something that you all might not know about me is that I started praying for my future husband when I was 13.
Okay.
And because I love to write poetry, I wrote tons of different poems to him, and I put them together in kind of a book for Derek, and it's called For My Future Husband.
Now, this is great, because that's our topic today. It's all about marriage. So hold on to that, and we're going to hear more about that in just a minute. Okay, Deacon Stephen, how about you? Give us more about yourself.
I grew up at St. Catherine Parish in the little town of New Haven, 1,000 people. But my mother was from St. Anne's in Howardstown, which is even smaller than that, if you can imagine. And my dad grew up in St. Vincent de Paul in New Hope. So I kind of have roots in all 3 of those places. As for the fun stuff, I'm a longtime comic book fan. And a Star Trek fan too, and I quite regularly slip in quotations from Spock into my homilies with the code phrase of "a wise man once said."
Oh dear. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks to both of you, first of all, for being here and for what you're about to share. Besides what you've already told us already. Listen, we're going to talk about marriage today, but that's only a piece of the Office of Family and Life Ministries where you both work. So, Deacon Stephen, talk about your whole office and the work that you do. What's the work of the office?
Well, we're wide and broad, actually, as you well know. Family and Life Ministries office. I try to keep those two on equal footing. They have a multitude of areas of responsibility. The first and the most obvious is it's all things marriage, anything that has to do with that, and that includes providing marriage preparation programs, marriage enrichment programs, as well as serving to support the pastors and the staffs of all of our parish. You would be amazed at how often I get phone calls from priests or deacons or marriage prep staff persons that will say to me, "Deacon, I got a strange one for you this week." It would be amazed at how often that happens. We're also responsible for all things pro-life, and be that from representing the Archbishop at events, working closely with the Catholic Conference of Kentucky, and lots of pro-life partners on all manners of life-related issues. Anything that affects the dignity and the sanctity of human life, we're involved in that, or try to be. And my awesome colleague Stuart Hamilton assists with the various events in that area.
Very good.
We also have responsibility, not to keep on going, but for I like to call it global expressions of pastoral care here in the Archdiocese. Of course, the parishes are the primary providers of such things in pastoral ministry, but we help train their ministers in the finer points of things like hospital ministries, divorce care programs. There are several of those that we work with all over the Archdiocese. Incarceration ministries to the aging, and all sorts of related areas like that. Denise Bouchard, she handles all that in conjunction with working with Catholic Charities, which I think is a rather brilliant marriage of the two to work together on that. We also have Martine Siegel. She's our Director of Counseling and our Victim Assistance Coordinator. Now, Martine works with the schools a ton. Especially, she provides regular continuing education for their counselors. And so many people do not realize she also provides free referrals to anyone, and I mean anyone, who is in need of from mental or family psychological professionals here in Jefferson County. Not to mention, she's one of the first ones on the scene whenever there is a crisis in our parish and our schools. And I know, Brian, you have many stories that she could, and she has too, of things that have, in her long time of service. I can't praise enough the good work that she does each and every day.
So let me summarize it this way. So in all of the scope of the office, you're attending to people in some of their best and some of their worst.
Yeah,
is that right?
That's very well put. That is exactly right. We'll and which is, of course, that's Christian ministry.
Yeah.
You know, that's being the face of Christ, and you help people at all levels and accompany them.
We could probably do a show or a presentation, a podcast on numerous of those areas, but the one I want to focus on today, and it's Mistianna, it's your particular area of specialty, is we're going to talk about marriage. So what I'd like to do is, before we talk specifically about marriage prep, I have a kind of a personal question, and I already know your book's going to come out here. How did you prepare for marriage? Now, you started preparing, I think you said at 13, but how did you prepare for marriage, Mistianna?
Well, when Derek and I got engaged, we were both still in school at Western Kentucky University, and we were getting married, obviously, at St. Leo's in Murray. So we weren't able to do our marriage preparation with the priest who was going to marry us. So we ended up doing it with a priest over at Holy Spirit Catholic Church in Bowling Green. And our story is kind of a testament to the fact that if you work at it, you can make it through and have a wonderful lifelong marriage. Because when we took the focus inventory, our match, or our score, was 48 out of 100.
Is that a passing grade?
No.
Okay.
It is the lowest score that we have ever seen in doing 25 years of marriage prep.
Before you go further, tell us the purpose of focus is what?
Basically, it helps couples look at different areas that they will be experiencing in marriage, and they're questions that are very targeted. And what they want to look at is, first of all, do the couples match? And secondly, do the couples match with what the answer of the church would be?
Okay. So you and Derek got a low score of that and worked through it in your life all these years later. Very good.
Right.
How about Stephen? How about you? How did you prepare for your marriage?
Well, my wife Susan and I, she was a member of St. Gabriel Parish, which ironically is where I serve today. My mother-in-law was one of the founding members there, and the great Father Bill Hammer was pastor at the time. And when we decided to get married, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that that's where we would go. And Father Bill worked very, very well with us on the focus, and I think we passed. His face was not angry or anything like that. I had known him previously from my time at Bethlehem, so he was very good at working through that. We went to the Engaged Encounter weekend, which at the time was in Nazareth in Bardstown. Okay. Very familiar with that, and it was one of those I don't want to say it's a watershed moment, but it certainly was one of those moments where you realize, wait a minute, this is real. Mm-hmm. And we're doing this forever. Mm-hmm. And we better love each other. We better be committed to this, because, you think you are, you plan on that, but just going deep with some of the subjects that we went into really made it. I remember coming back from that, and Susan would tell me, says, "Wow, this is a real thing here. This is serious."
So the preparation. Let's clarify one thing. Focus isn't really something you fail. It gives you a score.
Very true.
It
Exactly.
shows you compatibilities.
Snapshot of where you are.
Snapshot, yes.
Because we started talking about like a test. We're going to scare everybody before they enter the focus program. Okay. But in this process, we recognize as a church that couples should prepare for marriage. But we also recognize that marriage for the Catholic tradition is also a sacrament. Deacon Stephen, why is marriage a sacrament?
I tell couples all the time when they're preparing to enter into matrimony that they are participating in something that's both holy and cosmic. I try and elevate that to a level. For most of us, we think of it in just the everyday levels. There are multiple scripture references, of course. We could go through all of them. The book of Genesis is one of the best, male and female. He created them. We were built for marriage. That's the intention. And one of the things the church has consistently taught is both the unitive and the procreative aspects. Being one with each other is bestowing new life. It comes with God. So all of these are complementary aspects of marriage. But Christ sanctified the institution. Matthew chapter 7 is a great one that talks about how it is a permanent, unbreakable bond between two people. That was new at the time.
But talk about why a sacrament, though, because you can get married with a judge. You can get married with all different kinds of places to get married. Why in the church? Why is it a sacrament for the church?
What you're speaking of, those other types, are what we would call a natural marriage. And they're beautiful, they're wonderful, they exist. But sacramentally is when Jesus Christ comes and lives within a person. God's reaching down from heaven into our lives. That's what all sacraments are. They bring both privilege and responsibility. And when Christ enters into the marriage by the free consent, we don't use words like vows or promises anymore. Consent is the right word, because that lets us know that when the couples come together, God is part of that marriage. And it is so important that it has been elevated to one of the quote-unquote 7 primary sacraments of the church.
So the sacrament the marriage is made holy.
That's right.
Because of God.
That's exactly right. And I tell couples all the time, don't you want Jesus Christ to walk with you through your rest of your lives together, helping you work through those difficulties that are inevitable?
Okay. Mistianna, let's go into a little bit deeper now about preparation. I know that there's various preparation programs, and we also know that it's marriage prep, not wedding prep, right?
Right.
So let's get deeper into that. Talk a little bit about how we here in the Archdiocese help prepare couples for marriage.
Right. Well, when Derek and I have a chance to meet with couples, we like to tell them that a wedding is a day, a marriage is a lifetime.
Okay.
And so it's really important for couples to view marriage as the end game. Not the wedding day, but marriage. Marriage as the end game. And I think it's very important also that couples devote as much time, energy, resources, and focus to preparing for their marriage as they do planning their wedding. One of the things that I did want to add was that when Derek and I prepared for our marriage, because we were polar opposites, completely polar opposites, and we came from very different families of origin, not right, not wrong, but just different. The priest that worked with us had us meet every Wednesday night for 2.5 hours for 8 months.
My goodness.
So that was 32 meetings. And I say that because that, to me, emphasizes the importance of marriage prep. Because if we hadn't had those meetings, we wouldn't have had some tools to utilize when we hit those different difficulties and hardships in our marriage.
Now, that's not common today. 32 sessions.
No, Lord, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was just that. I'm just saying that because I think it's really important for couples to realize that you really need to put effort and focus into preparing for your marriage.
So help us with what does it look like now for a typical couple? Contacts the church, I want to get married in X amount of time. What's the preparation like?
So one of the first options for them is to take part in what we call Foundations for Marriage.
Okay.
And Foundations is a one-day, really intense 8-hour session. It's held on Saturdays at various locations throughout the Archdiocese.
Okay.
Now, Foundations is for couples who are entering their first marriage, and we encourage them to do that early in the engagement process, because once they've taken their focus, Foundations is really a nice follow-up to that. Also, Foundations teaches basic fundamental skills and knowledge that the couples are going to need to build strong and lasting marriages. And so we use a variety of learning styles in those classes of Foundations, and we talk about topics like marriage as a sacrament, married love or intimacy in marriage, families of origin, finances, and communication and conflict management. So that is one option for the couples who are coming into the Archdiocese and wanting to get married in the church. Now, our second option is the Engaged Encounter. It's called the Catholic Engaged Encounter, and we offered that to couples as well. It's basically well, first of all, let me say that Deacon Stephen and his wife Susan, and Derek and I both participated in the Engaged Encounter. And it's basically a highly effective Catholic-based marriage preparation program. You do it over a weekend, and they do it at various parishes throughout the Archdiocese, and it's an in-depth, it's private, and it's highly personal. So couples get to do what they want to do most. They get to have one-on-one time together. And in that one-on-one time, they're going to be, first they hear a presentation about an aspect of marriage, and then they go back and talk about it. So some of the things that they actually talk about at Engaged Encounter is their views and expectations of marriage, understanding oneself, attitudes about money, about sex, children, and family, and the role that they're going to play in the church and in society. Now, our third marriage prep program that we want to talk about is, sorry, I need to take a little sip of water. But the third program is what we call Sponsor or Companion Couple. And this really provides a personal approach to marriage prep. Couples meet one-on-one with a trained married couple, and it's also designed for first marriages. The program that we use here in the Archdiocese is called Joined by Grace, and it looks at marriage through the lens of the 6 remaining sacraments. Finally, if couples are going to get married later in life, after being widowed or receiving a decree of nullity, we have programs for them and options for them. And I would just say that they need to contact Deacon Stephen and the Office of Family Ministries for more information about that.
Okay, so if a couple's planning on getting married, they contact their church and they're given these options that they can consider.
Right.
What basically fits their schedule or their lifestyle or their questions. Okay, very good. Now, I'd like to hear from both of you on this. You hear lots of stories about what people are like these days and how they're different than days gone by. Both of you been married for a long time. What do you know about today's couples? What do you notice about couples today? That's a general question, and I don't mean to stereotype, but what are some trends? What are some things you observe? Stephen, can you help us?
I have a great amount of faith in this current generation. I'm going to start it out right by that. They are so often pillarized by others, the older generations. Well, the young people, they don't know. They don't have an experience. They don't know. I think that's completely wrong. They're deliberate, they're clear-minded, and they're very prudent when it comes to issues like marriage. They recognize this is intended to be forever. and they realize the level of the stakes. So many of them, and this is, of course, the ones that come to the church in particular. But I think it's a trend that we're finding everywhere. And I believe that a lot of that has to do with the reason that they're smarter and a little bit more cautious. They're waiting longer to get married. I can tell you that is because statistically, for the last 60 years, the divorce rate has been 50%. That's pretty flat. It's actually dropping slightly. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that so many of these young people are either children of divorce or they know somebody who has been through divorce, and they want no part of that.
So that makes them more cautious.
More cautious, absolutely. Yeah. And I think I like the word deliberate better, because they really they're not really something that let's just try this. Now you hear about that, and certainly movies and television kind of show that, but in the real world, the world we live in particular, there's a lot of they understand the seriousness of this.
Okay. Mistianna, what can you tell us? Some trends you know about couples today? You deal with a lot of them.
Right. So today, the average couple getting married, the woman is around 28 years of age, and the man is about 30. And that's something that has not been the trend in years past. So they are definitely waiting longer to get married. Another huge difference is that today about 62% of couples meet online, either on dating apps or on social media. And so that's a huge difference in what we're seeing as far as what kind of couples are out there today.
I'm dating myself when I say this. That sounds so impersonal to me. Do they say that's impersonal, or do they say, no, that's how we communicate?
Well, they say that's how they communicate. And the interesting aspect of this is that because of that, couples are being engaged a lot longer than before. So the average couple is engaged for 4 years.
4 years?
4 years.
My goodness.
And they are engaged for that long, I think, because they are meeting on social media, and it takes them a lot longer to really get to know each other. And they are savvy. Like Deacon Stephen said, they are very savvy. And they want to make sure that when they get married, they're ready for it. I guess something else that we see a lot of is a lot of interfaith couples. That's a big change from before.
Huge. Okay. Okay. Now there's a lot of data you've already set out there about how many couples end up divorced. About half of them, and maybe going a little bit less than that now. But that's one statistic. But I'd like to give you a multiple choice question here. What are the things that impact marriage, positively or negative? Here's some things. You've already mentioned several of them. Talk about sex and intimacy. You talk about money. You talk about in-laws. You talk about having children, health impacts. Pick one of those topics and tell us, how do you see that impacting marriage as you deal with couples who are married or preparing for marriage? Pick one. Anybody? Mistianna, go ahead.
Okay.
Pick one. Sure.
Well, as somebody who's been married 30 years, I can honestly tell you that marriage is amazing, but it is also a lot of work.
Okay.
And
Amen.
so,
Yes.
Yeah, right. And we have to realize that there are going to be challenges and there are going to be disagreements in marriage. That's just the facts. Unfortunately, like Deacon Stephen said, a lot of couples come from divorced families, and they haven't learned the skills needed to work it out. So one of the things that my mom told me when Derek and I had been married about 5 years was, obviously, marriage is hard work, but it's worth it. And it's worth it to stick it out, to work it out, and in order to love living it out.
Okay.
So basically, we get back to the fact that it's hard. When it's hard, a lot of times, because they come from divorced families, they don't have the skills to be able to do that, to be able to walk it out. Work it out. It's a lot easier to go back to what they know how to do, which is, walk away.
So that they haven't had a model of a couple, their parents staying together, so that
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one. Deacon, one of those topics that struck you that when you hear that list, what do you see?
Well, I do need to say that all of them are necessary. Of course, all of them are important. But if you ask me to put it down to one where I think this is the key, or at least the closest, the word intimacy is absolutely at the top of the list, because our understanding, our belief of intimacy reflects the lowest possible minimization level, that being physical, sex. And we try at Foundations for Marriage in particular, we try and let them come together and learn that intimacy is extremely broad. In fact, that's almost every encounter you have with your spouse is and must be a form of intimacy. We use the acronym called SPICE, meaning spiritual, physical, intellectual, creative, and emotional. All those types, and we train them in Foundations in particular. Where are you expressing that in your relationship now, and how can you pay that forward later in life? Because the couples that stay intimate with each other in all aspects of their lives are the ones that have the successful, long-lasting marriages.
Okay.
They just have to cultivate the skills.
And I want to add to that, Brian, that it's really important, even though you're married, to continue dating your spouse.
Absolutely.
Because you want to maintain that closeness and connection. And one of the favorite things that Derek and I do is we do something called couch time. And we encourage couples to that. We basically spend one-on-one time, face-to-face, 15 to 30 minutes a day, talking to each other without any distractions. So that means no technology, no kids, no distractions. And that is really important because today couples only spend 5 minutes a day in face-to-face interaction talking to each other. So, if we're talking to each other 15 or 30 minutes a day, we've got a big jump on having really good communication in our marriage.
Wow, society would really push against some of that with the need to have sometimes multiple jobs, to deal with child care, deal with family matters. There's a lot
it's
of
not
pressure,
easy sometimes.
to find very, very good.
It's not, and we just have to remember that it is hard work, but it really is worth it.
Your couch time introduced a topic that I know that we sometimes talk about, besides marriage preparation, marriage enrichment. Deacon Stephen, tell our listeners, our audience, a little bit about how marriage enrichment works for us.
Well, I mean, there's kind of a multi-pronged approach to that. Our office is always available, and whether it be myself, Derek, and Mistianna, or others that we partner with, to go out to the parishes, and we've done that. I've been to Holy Cross to do a marriage enrichment. The late Father Brian Lamberson kind of came to me and asked me, "Why don't you come out here?" And I said, "Okay, when's the date?" And we did. So those things are available to us. We also partner with other outside-oriented entities, for lack of a better term. I mean, Engaged Encounter is simply one of them. They're an outside organization that we kind of endorse and work with. And for one example of which is the Retrovi program, which I cannot speak highly enough about because it helps troubled marriages. It has saved literally hundreds of marriages in trouble here in this archdiocese over the last 20 years. And of course, most people that participate in it don't want that known, so you don't hear stories from people about it. But it is alive and well and doing great work.
Okay. We only just have time for just one or two more questions. Time goes fast, doesn't it?
Oh, doesn't it?
It does.
Tell me a little bit about, because you mentioned it a few minutes ago, Mistianna, interfaith marriages. This has become more and more common. Was for a long time people married people from their own, what we used to sometimes refer to as tribe, their own religion, their own ethnic background, their own town. Now, not so much, especially apparently social media. You can meet lots of people. But tell me about interfaith marriage a little bit. What role does faith play in marriage?
I can tell you, having worked in this office for about 10 years now, 80+% of the marriages that are here, that are taking place in our churches and our parishes, are interfaith. That's the norm. It's overwhelmingly the norm. You could talk to any of the pastors, and I know they'll back that up for me. I'll steal a line from Archbishop Kurtz, and from a few years back. He said, "We do what we do not because anybody else is Catholic, but because we are." So it's kind of we want to bring that fundamental institution of sacramentality to those. There are tons of experiences we've had. I remember sitting for 4 hours at a focus session with a couple one night because he was fundamentalist Baptist and had never really, he had lots of misunderstandings about the Catholic faith and was a little bit worried about entering into that. And he had a clergyman right in front of him that he could fire off questions to. And we did. And it was a blast. It was absolutely amazing to be able to make that personal connection, which is what we try to do when all the marriage prep that we do is very, very soft when it comes to, we recognize that many of you are not Catholic. We're here to inform you. We do not proselytize. We do our very best to try and let you know the joy that we know as Catholics and inform you. Because at least one of you is Catholic, so we're going to help you.
We can tie that together with my final question about interfaith marriages early, about God in marriage. How does a couple keep God as the center of their marriage? Mistianna, help us with that.
I think we have to realize that faith is the bedrock of a Christian marriage. And so we really encourage couples to go to Mass together. It's really interesting to me that you often see in church parents who have 2 children under the age of 5, and they're at Mass and they're telling their children, to sit down, be quiet, don't climb on the pews, at the same time trying to listen to the homily. And as Derek and I have experienced, a lot of times it's hard to go to Mass as a family because maybe you're out on a big, maybe you're out of town and you're at a cheerleading competition or a volleyball competition. And so sometimes as a couple, just going to Mass together is important. That's really important. But some other ways I think that you can keep marriage, you can keep faith in your marriage is by praying together. We encourage couples to pray together. Not only to pray at mealtime, but also to pray before bed. It's really, if you want to know your spouse very intimately, it's through prayer and through the things that they pray about. That's a very intimate experience.
Very good. Deacon Stephen, how about you?
Well, I'll echo everything that Mistianna said. You have to find a way to stay close to Christ. And I understand that requires a lot of work, especially in this modern busy time. Staying close to the Word is one of the great things, I think. And, of course, regular reception of the sacraments are also part of that. I can't tell you how many couples, and, of course, I'm at a large parish. Derek and Mistianna are at a large parish. So we see a lot of couples who do make that difficult decision sometimes to bring their families with them. And we always welcome them and do our best to support them. I have a sister who's been bringing my little niece to St. Gabriel since she was born. And my sister's a cantor. And you'd be amazed the influence that this has, because my niece could sing the Gloria at 2 and make no mistakes. And that's just constant exposure really is the thing.
People pick up family practices that way.
Yeah.
Well, this is very good. We're out of time for this podcast. So let me close this out this way. Thank you to both of you for what you do, for many years of service to the Archdiocese. There's many, many scores of couples who you have impacted in ways you probably don't even know it, whether it be through your preparation programs, through your referral services, through your enrichment activities, and just being witnesses, both of you, in your marriages to your various spouses. Thank you for modeling it, for enriching the church, and for working with you every day. You're a blessing to this Archdiocese. And thanks for being part of this show today.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian. Thank you.
And thanks to you, our listeners and viewers, for joining us for this podcast series for February 2025. We'll see you again next month. Please tune in.